right, our next guest is a force to be reckoned with. Her name is Sarah Personette. After working on Facebook's global customer marketing team as a strategic consultant for the CPG vertical, Sarah shifted roles to build the global agency team at Facebook and is focusing on building out relationships with the agency community. She believes there is a real opportunity to mobilize agencies to design creative social campaigns from the very beginning. So let's give a warm welcome to Sarah.
Hi, is this on? Yes? Okay. So I'm not sure if I'm a force, but I certainly am tall. I'm my last name means little person in French, which is always slightly ironic and a good fun fact. So I clearly am not Mark Zuckerberg. I can't talk to you about what it was to actually build Facebook at the very beginning. But what I would like to talk to you about is what does it mean to actually build a competency or a practice within a startup company. And there are a lot of challenges that I think you guys are facing today that parallel the challenges that I faced over the course of the last year and a half. So just a quick background for me. I actually was on the agency side of the business for my entire career prior to coming to Facebook. And the agency side of the business, I'm going to show you the slide in a second. I'm the only person that has slides, which is reflective of my marketing background. But I was on the agency side of the business for the last 15 plus years, really building big brands from Coca-Cola to the Mars Wrigley business, helping them to understand how they leverage advertising in order to make their businesses more profitable, in order to make their consumers or their people more happy with interacting with those brands. So it was a really exciting day when I actually got to come to Facebook, and I'll tell you that story in a second. Hold on one second. Okay, so this is my Facebook profile. On the left is my mom and my dad, and I wanted to start with a story. On June 5th, 2010, I called my dad. I was super excited to tell him that I had just accepted a job at Facebook. Now, I had been working with Facebook, as I mentioned, because I was on the agency side for a variety of years. I really thought that, in my mind, Facebook was a very established company. So I thought my dad was going to be just as excited about this opportunity to go and work with a technology company, be more closely connected with Silicon Valley, and really also start to integrate, for me, the fundamentals and the foundation of social media into my career. And I was surprised when there was dead silence on the phone. Literally like 3 minutes of dead silence for my dad. I could be like, Dad, are you on the other line? Are you there? And he said, why would you want to do that? You have a successful position in a great company. You're growing. It seems like that's just a change you don't need to make. And a part of that was really interesting to me because what he realized and what he wound up explaining to me is that it actually still was a startup. And for me, that wound up being a great reminder as I started this competency within Facebook that it was indeed still a startup. So starting a team inside of an organization that has various challenges to those that are fully established, have the funding, have the resources from a time and human perspective to really put against your vision is different than when you're working in an organization that is constantly growing and changing and iterating very fast. So to quickly zoom out for a second, I don't know if anyone's ever seen this before. This is a Lumascape, which is the complexity of the marketing and advertising world today. This is a lot more complex today because of technology and the way that people are able to interact with each other and the way that they're able to deliver messages to consumers. The area that I focus on right now is that piece that's blocked out in red. On the far left, it's representative of all the holding companies and the agencies that work with brands on our platform. And then on the right side of that box
up are all the trading desks that work through a lot of the advertising and the monetization piece. So those are my core customers. They represent, advertising and marketing overall represent about $500 billion in terms of the size of the marketplace. Agencies today control $250 billion, ultimately actually a little bit more than $250 billion. So when we're talking about size and scale and influence, we're talking about big size, big scale. They also represent the largest brands in the world. They service the largest brands in the world, and they also represent small businesses, like the small businesses you guys are building each and every day within this room. So I'm going to talk through 5 things that, as I reflected on the journey of building the global agency team and the vision that we started this with, which was really trying to help those agencies understand how to build on top of our platform and how to reach consumers in a new, creative way, leveraging the social space. The first pillar was really, and is there any way technically to like lower it? Just the screen? If not, that's okay. This says identify the gap. So the first step was really identifying what were we going after. And I mentioned before that agencies controlled around $250 billion worth of revenue. That was significant. The second thing was building a plan around how we were actually going to service this particular gap. And as I mentioned before, within a startup organization, and when I joined Facebook, it was around 1,200 people. We're bigger than that now. We're probably maybe more around like 4,000 people. But our competitors in the marketplace are multiples of 10 times that size, right? So we're small company. Human resources, capital resources, time resources were very much in demand, and were very, very precious. So the first thing in writing that plan, it was 2 pages, right? I didn't make it complicated. I was very clear in terms of what we wanted to achieve, what we needed to achieve that from a human resource perspective. We did not have a lot of people. That grid that I showed before on the agency landscape is representative of over 500,000 people that would ultimately need to be serviced by this group. And for the first 4 months, I was one person servicing it across the entire globe. We added on 2 more people, and then 2 more people from there within that first 6 months. So a really lean startup is a part of that plan. The third thing is that we made a really strong case as to why this gap was critical to fill. So the way that the advertising or the marketing side of our organization was focused was on the end client. So that would be on the Coca-Cola client, actually talking to that brand manager and trying to make that sale, if you will, instead of thinking about scalable solutions. So in an environment where you are super constrained in terms of human resources, you have to think about how do you scale your message? How do you create ambassadors or evangelists in the marketplace today who can say, this is why you should be here. This is why you should build on this platform. This is why you should leverage, in our case, why you should leverage our advertising platform, and why your brand should really consider being a part of integrating this into your broader marketing campaign. Agencies can do that because agencies represent a portfolio of brands and a portfolio of businesses. So one training that I do for an agency can hit 10 to 15 different clients, whereas if I just have one meeting training one client, all I'm doing is influencing that one client. So really thinking about the scale and how I leverage that in my plan in the identification of the gap was super important to actually getting the quote-unquote funding to create this and bring it forward. The second piece is committing to 6 months, and it's going to take a lot longer than 6 months for any of you to build your business. However, I think what you have to really think about is just putting everything else on hold for 6 months, quite honestly. I say that because that's what I had to do, and as I've brought people into my team, That's one of the things that I've encouraged them as well. So I basically said to my husband, I was like, you know what, this is really important to me. It's important to the company. And what I need is your support for the next 6 months to be able to go hard against this mission, set up this team, and then reassess. The reassessment piece was also important. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But the going hard for 6 months and getting the buy-in from my friends and my family and the company was critical to giving me the freedom to do what I needed to do, right? There was no one saying, hey, you know what, why aren't you home for dinner, or why aren't you focused on something else as a priority within this company? They knew I had a mission, they knew exactly what I was going to do, and they knew that when I got to the end of that 6 months, I was going to be very critical in my analysis of whether or not I had achieved success with the agency world in order to then continue to grow the team, or should we shut down the competency? So that brings me to the next point, which is that we have a saying at Facebook called fail harder. And fail harder allows you to actually go big or go home. I knew that after 6 months, that I had succeeded, right? We have a long runway to continue to build and grow with this particular audience or constituency within the agency world. But after those 6 months, what I heard from the agency leadership teams were that they need more, right? They didn't need less of us, they needed more of us. They needed more of our team to help them survive, grow, and change quickly in this rapidly evolving landscape. And that allowed me, though, to say with full confidence back to the organization, I know in a headcount restrained world, it's going to be hard for you to give me one more person versus giving that one more person to product and engineering, to design, to sales, where sales actually has a quota on their head. But here's why I need that. And here are all of the examples of leaders saying this team is working, even though it is a lean and mean team. So really important that 6 months, I think, can be daunting to say, wow, this is what I'm just going to be entirely focused on, but an important one to just ask for that forgiveness up front. And then I think from there, I still work as hard, right? I still am spending a lot of time on building this team and seeing where it's going to go in the next iteration. But I feel really confident that I was able to create a lot of those inroads in all the different markets around the world and all the agencies around the world to demonstrate the potential success of this. So that is the second pillar. The third pillar is really about listening. And probably not a surprise, because I would imagine the users that you are building for today, you're listening to. The aha for me was who I was listening to, though. And the first one was my core clients, which were the agencies. And in building a competency, especially in a company that changes so quickly, the way that we service them has to change and evolve very quickly. So 2 examples of how we did that. The first one is around education. The number one thing I hear from agencies all the time is that they need to be educated on how to build on our platform for their clients and for their brands. We are consistently introducing new products, new ways to buy us. We're evolving the ecosystem. And so they need to understand what they should leverage, how they should leverage it, when they should leverage it. So a variety of different complexities. The model that I initially created was more of a high-touch model. We wanted to go deep inside of an organization, do live, real-time training, be able to respond and answer with questions, because we thought that that actually would be more meaningful and the people would take away and retain that knowledge. What I actually wound up finding over the course of the first 6 months is that that was not true. It actually needed to be a high-tech solution, also to get to the scale piece of it. And in addition to the high-tech solution, it needed to meet a variety of different educational needs. The dynamic of the agency world is one where you have creative agencies who are building and creating brands, or for brands, and then you have media agencies, and those media agencies are buying advertising, optimizing advertising, and really making sure that the message is getting in front of the right person. 2 different skill sets, but both exceptionally critical to the success of brands on our platform. So what I wound up creating was a program called Facebook Studio Edge, which we launched a few months ago. And it's a tech version of training. So it's basically a portal where you can get certified in Facebook credentials. So it goes through a variety of different modules that speak to the creative needs and speak to the media needs. And I wouldn't have gotten there had I not spent enough time really being open to listening to what agency leadership was saying about the barriers that their talent were facing in terms of our platform. The second thing that was a good example was policy. So anyone who is working with Facebook right now or building your business on top of Facebook and is trying to understand our policy will probably say that it is fairly complex. The reason for our policy is that it's designed to actually think about building the right and best user experience on the platform. So it actually is a guideline for how to properly build, but it's really long and people are moving really fast. So I have always completely understood when agencies said, I just don't get your policy. And what we wound up finding is that there was success in some of the smaller, very creative, more influential organizations that had tapped 1 to 2 people that were focused entirely on our policy. And as a result, the experiences with brands that they were building out were more meaningful and more effective than those that we saw with other agencies. So we introduced the Facebook Policy Summit. And this is meant for a specific constituency within the agency world that really needs to understand and own our policy and then help scale that across their entire organization. So it solves for 2 things. 1, how do you build better experiences on our platform? And then 2, how do you leverage those ambassadors, again, on the agency side to really scale that for us in a way that we just can't do because we don't have enough people? That was one way that one group that we listened to. The second group that I spent a lot of time listening to was the internal sales team. And Sandy earlier talked about building consensus within an organization and the importance of that. I can't stress that enough. A lot of my job is certainly external, but the internal component of talking with cross-functional teams, helping them to understand the need set that my clients have so that we can build products that more closely align to those needs and fix those needs, but also hearing what the internal folks need from us to be able to move their business forward is really important. So our sales teams, as they have worked with different client groups, have found certain blocks or barriers at times with agency teams. And we historically were doing a lot of immersion sessions with agencies. We'd go really deep on our product, explain how to build on our platform, and then call it a day. So there might be like a 6-hour session, really exciting, inspirational. But once you get back to your desk, you have a lot of other stuff to work on when you're on the agency side that pull you in different directions. So what we wound up doing is flipping the immersion sessions on their head and actually bringing all of the client teams into those sessions so that we could do breakout groups immediately after and do business planning and brand planning off of the immersion session. And this has been really important also for the success of our team and making sure that we get incremental resources, because now the sales team can say, yes, this actually helps to contribute to our bottom line. It helps to contribute to people more effectively being able to monetize and build on our platform. So the second to last pillar that I wanted to talk about was iterating fast. On the listen slide, I talked about sort of listening and then building really quickly. One of the ways that we talk about this at Facebook is just shipping it, and the belief that done is better than perfect. So the reason why done is better than perfect is that I can actually say whether or not I'm seeing results, and then I can iterate off of that, and I can change off of that. So when we first launched our global team, we had, like I said before, just a few people focused on global relationships at the holding company level. And one of the things that I found out pretty quickly is that there was a challenge in the U.S. market, in that the U.S. market represents like a huge part of our business. And as we were working with agencies, we were working with them in the way that we were organized, not in the way that they were organized. So we had to actually create a US agency team that was focused on them, so a regional practice. At the same time, we had a holding company practice. And we've since grown this so that we can basically be almost like fund managers. We wrap our arms around the entire agency, their portfolio of business, and we help them navigate our organization and build on the success that they've seen, or help them solve for the challenges they have with our organization. And then we also have our global leaders that are focused on the holding company as a whole and helping them to create new business models for how they think about growing revenue in a socially connected world. The dynamic of having a regional practice and a holding company practice matrixed together has been a learning that I wouldn't have necessarily gotten to if I hadn't just built it, shipped it, and then iterated off of it. So that is a really, really important component to getting it done. And I think that as we think about products that Facebook introduces, the reason you oftentimes see lots of different products coming over the fence is because we're shipping it and then we're listening and we're learning from our users to be able to make it a better experience than it's been in the past. The last piece that I wanted to talk about was remaining small and lean to start. So the competitors within this space are really big. It is, even the competitors to my actual team are really well staffed and really big. And there is something that's great when you're designing a service model. People and heads are important to that. But when you're trying to create something inside of a startup that lives and breathes with the cultural norms of that organization, it's very important to create a competency that also is small and lean and leverages those cultural norms. So staying small was very, very important to the company at large, and thus it's been a really important thing for us. It's also allowed us to learn some very important things. The first one is that it forced us to create an ungoal. So I'm sure all of you guys are facing the challenge of there are so many different things that you need to get done. You almost sometimes don't know where to prioritize or what to take off of that list. And what I love about Facebook is that not only do we have goals and priorities, we actually have what are the things that we're not going to do. And they're most likely really good ideas. They are things that we probably should be doing, but we can't do right now because the 5 things ahead of that are even more important, more scalable, and are going to be more effective than anything in the past. So the ungoal is really, really important. An example of that today, I actually just had a baby a few months ago and came back about 6 weeks ago. And as we parallel path thinking around media agencies and creative agencies, both are significant and influential to what I believe is really the success of brands building on our platform. However, in the last few months, we have introduced a lot of new ways to buy our platform that have created new, unique opportunities, but also have created some complexity. So the focus is going to be on media agencies in the next quarter to be able to quickly land that complexity and take it from complex to clarity, right? What that doesn't mean is that creative agencies aren't as critically important, because they absolutely are extremely important to the success of Facebook and the success of brands. But it allows us to actually create an ungoal for 1 quarter of pivoting towards one area of the business versus the next, and then our long-term strategy is to still build out with them. But creating this ungoal also allowed for my team to say, okay, I don't have to accomplish everything in the first, in the first few months of being on this business. I actually can take time to focus on this, accomplish the goal, and then move on to the next task at hand. The second thing is that really remaining small and remaining lean allows you to understand where redundancy is necessary and where it's not necessary. So when I first joined the company, I think we had 1 or 2 engineers that actually were focused on newsfeed. And for anyone who uses Facebook, newsfeed is like the main thing that you look at every single day. And the fact that we had 1 to 2 people really means there's no redundancy at all in that product. And that's how we've taken our approach to building this practice for global agencies as well. There historically has not been any redundancy. There's 1 person per holding company, and there wasn't a lot of depth to that team. Now, what we've been able to see is as our clients and the agencies are moving faster in different areas, we actually do have to identify resources that can create depth to that particular team if they are moving fast enough. And so it's allowed us to go back to the management team and say, this is why we need resources in this area, and this is why we need to create redundancy in this particular team, because this relationship is so critical. The way that they're building and inventing on our platform is so meaningful to our success and their success that we actually need to be able to surround them with the right type of service model. But I can say with 100% confidence, coming from a lean and mean team, that that is the right thing. And then the last piece is that it basically allows us to prove success overall, because I know that I haven't taken away from precious resources that are needed or required in other areas, and that every single person on our team is a productive member of the overall company. And that productivity is really, really important. We basically need to be producing at 150% because in a technology organization, the engineering teams are the ones that are creating, and we want to make sure that we are adding value each and every day. So the last piece that I wanted to talk about was, where are we in this journey as we assess it? And we talk about at Facebook that we're 1% done. And as I think about kind of my team that we've built, I think we're probably 1% done. Maybe we're 1.5% done. But we have a long ways to go in terms of helping every agency really, really understand and integrate our ecosystem into their world and the way that they are building for brands today. Success for me means continued reassessment of how we are growing. So monetization, a big focus obviously of my particular team. So we look at growth numbers consistently, but what we also look at is how agencies are actually creating new competencies within their own world. How are they actually using social and using Facebook to create new jobs for their teams? How are they thinking about building better businesses for their brands that are driving a really healthy return on investment overall to drive sales for those clients? So that is almost the conclusion. I wanted to bring it back to my dad for a second. So if anyone has not read Eric Ries's book on the lean startup, I highly recommend it. But one of the things that he says is that entrepreneurship is a kind of management. And I thoroughly believe that. I commend all of you because building a company from the ground up or from scratch is an incredible feat and an incredible challenge. And managing, building something that is both either in a startup or once you've gotten into a world where that company is large and you're trying to maintain the integrity of startup principles really takes a very strong manager. And it takes someone who has a very, very solid vision to bring that entire team along to recognize that vision and deliver that cross markets, cross clients, and across teams internally. And my dad, who was certainly a skeptic, not because he didn't like Facebook, but a skeptic because he didn't understand why I was leaving this other world and this other position, today is probably one of the biggest proponents of Facebook overall, and really, actually, I think he would join the company if he could. And I look at him as sort of a barometer of my success and and whether or not I've made the right choices. And with a lot of confidence, I can say that he is really proud and really excited about the work that we're doing. And I would say the same thing to you guys. I mean, you should be so proud of everything that you are doing as entrepreneurs, as builders, as creators and innovators, and also, most importantly, as women in a unique world that we live in today. So with that, I will answer any questions if there are questions.